Let's be honest, we're living in the age of myth. Our movie theatres are the new temples, and our gods are made of pixels and light. We've seen gods of thunder, lightning wielders, and kings of the sea. Hollywood has dropped billions of dollars to make sure we know every shiny corner of Asgard and every last dramatic spat on Mount Olympus. We know Thor, the cocky but noble prince. We know Zeus, the powerful, always cheating king of the gods. We know Hercules and all 12 of his labours. These stories are the bedrock of our blockbusters, remixed and retold until they're as familiar as our own faces. But what if I told you there's another pantheon of gods out there? One with stories just as epic that Hollywood absolutely refuses to touch. I'm talking about a mythology bursting with warrior queens, poets who can change their shape, and all-powerful fathers whose magic could literally end and restart the world. These are the gods of the ancient Celts, a people who ran Europe for centuries. Their stories are packed with brutal battles, gut-wrenching tragedy, and a kind of raw, wild magic. So why are these incredible figures stuck in the shadows? Why do we get an endless parade of Greek demigods, but not a whisper about Ireland's greatest champion, Cú Chulainn? Why can Marvel build a multi-billion-dollar empire on Norse Pantheon, but their few attempts at Celtic characters are basically footnotes, with their powers and stories twisted all out of shape? The answer isn't that their stories are boring. It's the exact opposite. The real reason Hollywood is scared of Celtic gods is because their myths are a total creative nightmare for the studio system. They're too real, too chaotic, and way too complex for the simple, marketable, good guy versus bad guy formula that the big budget movies depend on. And that very complexity is what makes them so amazing. Hollywood's business model runs on a formula. It needs heroes who are good, villains who are bad, and worlds that can easily map out for 10-picture franchise. It needs a canon, one official set of stories to pull from. Celtic mythology gives them none of that. Instead, it throws up 3 massive roadblocks that make it almost impossible to adapt for a modern blockbuster. It's got a hero problem, a universe problem, and a world building problem. These stories aren't just hard to simplify, they fight against it. Their power is that their moral ambiguity is messy, fragmented history, and their deep, almost psychedelic connection to the natural world. Try to cram them into a Hollywood box just breaks everything that makes them special. Every blockbuster needs a hero you can cheer for. Think about Captain America. The guy is the definition of moral clarity. Even when he's a rebel, he's fighting for something we get. Or look at Marvel's Thor. He starts off arrogant, but he learns to be humble. His character's arc is clean. His motives are clear, and you never doubt he's a good guy. Now let's meet Ireland's greatest mythological hero, Cú Chulainn. On the surface, he seems perfect, hero material. He's a demigod, son of the god Lugh, an immortal princess. He's super strong, a warrior without equal, and destined for eternal fame. His legend is the main event in the Ulster cycle, one of the great collections of Irish myths. As a boy named Sedanta, he killed the chieftain's giant ferocious guard dog in self-defence, and then, as an act of honour, offered to take his plates. That's how he got his name, Cú Chulainn, the Hound of Cullen. Sounds like a noble hero, origin story, right? No, because Cú Chullainn's defining trait, the source of his unmatched power, is something called the Rheastrad. It is often translated as warp spasm or battle frenzy, but those words don't even come close. When the Rheastrad takes him, Cú Chulainn becomes something totally inhuman, a monster that can't tell friend from foe. Let me read you a description from the old text. When the warp spasm hits him, his body made a furious twist inside his skin, so that his feet and shins switched to the rear, and his heels and calves switched to the front. He sucked one eye deep into his head. That wild crane could not probe it. The other eye fell out along his cheek. His mouth weirdly distorted. His lungs and liver flapped in his mouth and throat, and fiery flakes large as a ram's fleece reached his mouth from his throat. This is not a hero powering up. This is a body horror nightmare. During the famous cattle raid of Cooley on Tawnbo Cúlig, Cú Chulainn defends the border of Ulster all by himself. But he does it in these monstrous fits, killing everyone in his path. This isn't a hero wrestling with a dark side. This is a hero whose greatest weapon is a total, horrifying loss of his own humanity. How do you put that on a lunchbox? How do you sell action figures of a hero whose lungs are flapping in his mouth? And it gets more complicated. In one of his most tragic stories, Cú Chulainn kills a mighty warrior, only to find out it was his own son, Conla. He's a hero defined by tragedy, rage, and acts that are, by our standards, monstrous. He's complex, terrifying, and deeply sad. He's not the smiling, marketable hero a studio needs for a $200 million movie. It's very telling that a film adaptation with A-lister Michael Fassbender has been stuck in development hell for over a decade. Even with a huge star attached, the character himself is just too much of a commercial risk. And Cú Chulainn isn't a one-off. He's a pattern. Celtic figures are rarely just good or evil. Queen Maeve, the antagonist of the cattle raid, isn't some simple villain. She's a powerful ruler, a goddess of the land, with as much ambition as any male hero. The Morrigan, a goddess of war and fate, isn't just an evil witch. She's a terrifying primal force, sometimes helping, sometimes destroying, sometimes doing both at once. These characters don't fit into simple boxes. The stories aren't about good versus evil. They're about order versus chaos, fate versus free will, and the beautiful, terrifying, and uncontrollable forces of nature. So the heroes are a marketing nightmare. The source material is a logistic one. In the era of cinematic universe, studios want a clean, established canon. When Marvel made the Thor movie, they had decades of comics, which were based on the poetic and prose Edda, pretty organised collections of Norse myths. When someone makes a Greek myth movie, they have Homer's epics, which have a clear family tree and a coherent history. There's a Bible for the universe. Celtic mythology doesn't have one. The Celts had a powerful oral tradition, meaning bards and druids memorised and performed the stories. Writing them down wasn't a priority. Because of that, most of these myths weren't written down until centuries later. And here's the key part. They were written down by Christian monks. Now, these monks were often Irish scholars who genuinely loved the old stories, and we wouldn't have them otherwise. But they were also men of a new faith, looking at the old gods through a new lens. They weren't just writing it all down. They were filtering it, reinterpreting, and sometimes Christianising it. In some texts, the gods, the Tuatha Dé Danann, are described as magical kings and queens. In others, they're demoted to just fairies or even fallen angels. In one book, the Laur Gavala Éireann, the monks basically tried to jam the gods into a biblical timeline, turning them into magical tribes that just happened to live in Ireland before humans showed up. The result is a beautiful, fascinating, and completely chaotic mess of conflicting stories. You have different versions of the same tale, characters with multiple names, and backstories, and a timeline that's impossible to pin down. It's not one unified mythology. It's a patchwork of traditions from Ireland, Wales and Scotland. Trying to build a coherent movie franchise out of that is like trying to build castle out of fog. This is why, when a big franchise does try to use this stuff, it often gets hilariously wrong. In Marvel Comics, when Thor first meets the Celtic gods, he fights Lear. In Irish myth, Lear is a great king and a god of the sea. But in the comic, Marvel makes him the Lord of Lightning. Probably just to create a cheap mirror match for Thor. They took a major god and changed his entire identity, just to serve their plot. They didn't adapt the myth, they just stripped it for parts. They showed the core problem. The real mythology is seen as too messy, too weird to adapt faithfully. It's easier just to invent a Celtic-sounding lightning god. The final problem is the trickiest, but also the most important. The nature of the world itself. Hollywood makes its mythic worlds to be concrete. Asgard is a golden city in space. Mount Olympus is a palace in the clouds. You can render them in CGI and slap them on a poster. The Celtic Otherworld is nothing like that. The Otherworld, known by names like Tir na Nog, Land of Eternal Youth, isn't just a place you can fly to. It's a parallel dimension right alongside our own, when time moves differently and the laws of physics don't apply. You get there through ancient burial mounds, by diving to the bottom of a lake, or just by wandering into a magical mist. In these stories, the wall between our world and the other world is thin and always shifting. Nature isn't just a backdrop, it's a living gateway to the supernatural. It's a beautiful idea, but it's incredibly hard to show to an audience that are used to clear maps. How do you build a world that is defined by being undefinable? The ancient Celts weren't a single empire, they were a huge collection of tribes all over Europe. That decentralised culture is reflected in their mythology. There's no single Mount Olympus, no central hangout for the gods. Their power is the land itself. A specific hill, a particular river, a sacred tree. The deep mystical bond with nature is why the best adaptations of Celtic myths have been animated films. Movies like The Secret of Kells and The Wolf Walkers don't try to make a photorealistic world. They embrace the abstract, spiritual style of ancient Celtic art. Their visuals are all about flowing lines and intricate knots, mimicking the old manuscripts. They get that the Celtic world isn't about realism, it's about spiritual feeling. It's telling that this mythology has also found a home in smaller horror and dark fantasy films, where its eerie and unsettling themes feel right. A recently announced independent film called The Stolen Child, inspired by Scottish folklore, seems to be continuing this trend. These stories are being told just by creators outside the studio system who are willing to embrace the messiness. They prove that the very thing that scare Hollywood are what makes these stories so powerful. The point isn't to make the other world look real, but to make you feel it's real. So Hollywood keeps these stories locked away, calling them too risky. The heroes are too monstrous, the canon is too broken, and the world is too weird. And because of that, we're all missing out. We're missing the story of the Dagda, the good god, who is nothing like the wise, serious Odin. The Dagda is a god of immense power, but also of huge appetites. He owns a giant club that can kill 9 men with one end and bring them back to life with the other. He has a cauldron that never runs out of food, and a magic harp that can control the seasons and people's emotions. He's a god of life, death, abundance, but he's also sometimes shown as a bumbling oaf, a flawed and relatable figure. We're missing the true terror and majesty of the Morrigan, the triple goddess of war, who washes the bloody armour of soldiers fated to die. We're missing the tragedy of the children of Lear, who were turned into swans for 900 years, in a story of sorrow and endurance that echoes through Irish culture. We're missing the mythology, where the landscape itself is a character, where every hill and river has its own story, and where the line between the natural and the supernatural is beautifully, terrifyingly blurred. The irony, audience are starving for this kind of complexity. People are getting tired of the same simple hero stories, the moral greyness, the raw emotion, and the contradictory lore. The very things that made studio execs nervous are exactly what builds passionate fan bases. Celtic mythology isn't a creative nightmare, it's a creative challenge. It demands more from its storytellers and from its audience. It asks us to accept that heroes can be monsters, that stories don't need to be simple to be true, and that some worlds are more powerful when they stay just out of reach. The real reason Hollywood is afraid of Celtic gods is because they can't be tamed, and that's exactly why they need to be unleashed. These stories are a vital part of our world heritage. They're just sitting there waiting. The potential for incredible, unique movies and shows is right there, if a studio were just brave enough to try. I'm curious, what do you think? If you could bring one Celtic myth or one god to the big screen, which would it be? And who would you cast? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your ideas. Thanks for watching, and if you like this kind of content, we are going to produce a lot more and have produced in the past. So why don't you hit the like button, subscribe and hit the notification bell, and share this content for others who might be interested in the rich tapestry that is Celtic mythology. Until next time, Slán agus Beannacht.